death of one man is a tragedy. The death of 1,000 is a statistic. Everybody I was charged with protection went home to their friends and family, regardless of where home was in the world. History was being made. History. No, do it now. Don't ask me. Just do it. If not me, who? If not now, when? I was asked to write his eulogy by his employer in Iraq. I couldn't read it.
Mike Arrighi, my friend, it is so nice to see you again after all these years.
I was so tickled to get your message. Good to see you're still out there.
I'm going to do a quick introduction to you, but whatever I say is really not enough to highlight the legacy and career that you've had. No formalities here. Mike Arrighi has 40 years of security and law enforcement experience. He's performed with distinction for public and private sectors. Michael operated in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya between 2004 to 2012. And anyone that knows anything about geopolitics knows that this was at the peak of so much conflict, which I can't wait to talk to you about. I recall when Gaddafi was captured and killed. The guy on the ground was Mike Arrighi.
All the print media and the reporters and video, they had all left.
Yeah.
And so it was me and my team and a couple other, but virtually there was no journalists. They'd stay in the Corinthia Hotel and wouldn't leave it. The few that were there because they were afraid of their health and safety. Yeah. I don't blame them.
Mm-hmm. All of that is the tip of the iceberg because you've been in 2 wars, a revolution, you've been shot twice, tracked by a polar bear, and bitten by a lion.
They're not big kitty cats.
Oh my goodness. We're going to have to get into all of that. I want to start with the polar bear.
Oh, this was 1984, so it's 40 years ago. This summer. And a bunch of us cops, and we were all on the SWAT team together, and somebody got the bright idea and says, hey, why don't we go to Baffin Island? Now, I thought Baffin Island was in the Caribbean. And we went up there and worked with the Mounties, very lovely people. Had a grand time, but we're in this park called Ayahuitok. And it's the real deal. I mean, polar bears and Arctic foxes and seals and, narwhals and... So we were packing out, and the next day or so we were waiting for the freighter canoe to come get us. And found out, once we got extracted, we went back and were talking to the Mountie, Gordon Crow. Him and his wife were lovely people. He says, oh yeah, my locals got back from your last campsite. The weather was horrible, 90-mile-an-hour winds. It was just crazy. You guys were getting tracked by that polar bear up there because my people saw them scampering around one of them scampering around your camp and sniffing you out.
Oh my.
So we didn't even know it until we got back to, down south a little. So
wow.
It was interesting.
That must have been scary. I mean, polar bears are ferocious. They are ferocious. I mean, they kind of have to be. It's such rugged conditions. How often do you get to come across prey? I remember when I was in Antarctica, it's just like, how do things survive? It's so difficult,
Find a way.
They find a way. Yeah. And then, I hate seeing any animal killed, but when you see nature kind of going through its cycle of prey and predator and all of that, it's like, it's just, that's what keeps it going.
Well, there's somebody always higher up on the food chain than you are.
Yeah. Yeah. That's for sure. All right. So I'm very curious, as I told you about the podcast, I am on a mission of being able to index the legacies and the greatness of people like yourself, the very interesting people I've met that have really been inspirational and have done things unconventionally and unorthodox. In you, Mike, I saw somebody that was really exploratory, somebody that takes risk, somebody that carves their own path in the world. And through that, you did a huge service to, as I mentioned, the government, the private sector. You're a patriot. What I want to do is capture these legacies and be able to have them indexed for my children's generation who are now faced with a world that is unlike any other, with the introduction of AI into everyday society. I can't even imagine at the speed of which things are compoundedly changing, how the world will look like when they are our age.
Right.
And so I think perhaps one of the most rare pieces of information when you're dealing with these AI systems and language models and all of that is actually like the humanity. So I'd love to know about your childhood. I'm a mom. I want to know about your mom. What is the type of mother that creates such greatness?
An Italian mother that's a good cook.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm very fortunate. I was adopted out of Washington, and I won the lottery. My parents were both great, hardworking, Depression-era people, and they tried to teach me to do the right thing.
And what did they do?
They forced me to go to a military private high school right over the street.
Okay. Was it boarding school?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't on Belmont Avenue. It's a day school.
Okay. But still a military school.
Yeah, ROTC. Mm-hmm. And I conned my way into being the lieutenant colonel of the Corps by the time I graduated.
Nice. So you had people skills at a young age, it sounds like.
Yeah, I like to engage with people. Mm-hmm. And that's why when I was working in the police department, the people would seek me out for my interview and interrogation skills. Because what I did more than most people, I'd listen. Mm-hmm. I'm not trying to feed any confession into your mouth. I'm going to let you tell your story. Now, when you're correct, I'll acknowledge. When you're wrong, I call it out. And I'm not going to do things like, well, there's any reason we'd find your fingerprints on the inside of that window? He was wearing gloves. Or, no, it never happened. So you kind of lose your footing. I think professional and morally, when you start trying to con people, kind of obviously, but look, it's just as important to find out somebody's innocence as it is to find their guilt. So yeah, I went to, graduated and went to VCU for several years.
Oh, okay.
Advertising and public relations major.
Really? Wow. Yeah. I didn't realize that.
And then didn't graduate because I was teaching martial arts at the time. And as you might imagine, a lot of my students were law enforcement, state, local, And so Richmond had not had a sit-down test for several years because they were under a federal Department of Justice consent decree. So once they opened up the testing, you had 300-400 people show up for the test. So I got the opportunity several months later. So I took the oath and was a Richmond cop for 12 years. Worked the SWAT team, all the uniform stuff, and ended up as a violent crime detective.
Oh my, that's difficult. It takes thick skin to be able to go through those types of cases. It's interesting. So, you've seen a lot of terrorism later in life. What's harder? I always wondered this for people that kind of have had those dual hats, like what's harder, seeing the atrocities and sort of the downstream effects of terrorism on societies. We kind of see it in a larger scale, or dealing with the large scale versus a small scale perpetrated attack by somebody that is evil.
What did Stalin say? Death of one man is a tragedy. The death of 1,000 is a statistic. Mm. So neither one of them look good downstream. You have to compartmentalize it sometimes, and you have to focus whether it's one person or whether you have a mass shooting. What is my job? And people, the community, my coworkers, the press, they want you to figure it out. And that's a good feeling when you can do that and bring down the stress level or the violence level in your assigned area of influence.
Do you think that people that perpetrate violent crime, Do you see that terrorists have a similar thread in that fabric?
Well, it's just, it's of course. I mean, first of all, trying to define terrorism is a slippery slope, because I don't think there's two U.S. government agencies that agree what it is. But broadly speaking, their sources, their methods, their opportunities, their means, they're very similar. I mean, even though, you get mugged on the street, it's not random crime. Somebody looked at you and said, I can get to him. It's random to you because you're the victim. And, look at the terrorists in the broad sense. They just don't wake up one morning and go, we're going to do this or that in this country. A lot of pre-planning. And then you have different layers. You have your above ground support unit. Then you have your intelligence gathering unit. Then you have an operational unit. Then you have the action arm. Mm-hmm. So it's built at many, many different levels.
It feels to me, though, that with terrorists, there is young indoctrination that happens that sort of flips that.
Well, sometimes they just get lost. Okay, I remember this organization called the Hitler Youth. And the secret in their warped mind was get to the kids early, identify who they are, let's make sure we nurture them. What's Russia doing to the Ukrainians? Mm-hmm. They're abducting these children, these Ukrainian children, and want to re-educate them and re-indoctrinate them, stripping them of their heritage and their language. Yes, I do have an opinion about that whole thing.
Yeah, I bet. What is it?
Oh, well, I don't know if the prognosis is any good or not, but one of the things that I hope I'm not going too far afield.
No, please.
It's just unconscionable. And I don't know if there is an end game. And now one of the candidates, I can solve it in 24 hours. I'm going to tell the Ukrainians to secede Donetsk and give it back to the people that stole it 4 years ago. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense. And if the rest of the world doesn't stand against Putin, I'm not saying the Russian people, we're going to have a horrible, horrible future for us.
It's very interesting to hear you talk about this because, you're a Cold Warrior, right?
I'm a Reagan Republican. I was.
What are you concerned about with American foreign policy right now?
Do we have any? I mean, I think Blinken has done an okay job. And you come from the oil and gas industry. I was talking to a friend the other day. I go, where's Rex Tillerson when you need him?
Oh, I love Rex.
He knows that part of the world.
Rex is a statesman.
Exactly.
Rex, I think, had he had the opportunity, would have been a monumental Secretary of State.
I'm sorry he didn't have the opportunity.
But perhaps he did. We don't really, I don't know exactly what happened. A small town, Richmond, huh?
The world's a big, small town.
Yeah. Well, it's true. Yeah, I guess with someone like you that's traveled so extensively, you realize that.
Well, we looked at retiring. We looked at Tbilisi, Georgia, retiring in Georgia.
Guys, amazing wineries, by the way. They're just not overridden by all the Europeans yet.
Oh, and then they have the cha-cha.
Yeah.
The moonshine.
Yep. It's funny, the moonshine. I was just talking to someone about that. There's always the local moonshine. Doesn't matter where you go. People just want to unwind. Where I grew up, we used to call it Sid, and it's essentially 180 proof, like 90% alcohol.
Jet
People's
fuel.
garages would light on fire making this stuff. Sid, short for Siddiqui. My friend.
I didn't know why until I was an adult. My dad and his best buddies, Italians, we'd make 250 gallons or whatever we could legally.
Yeah.
And my grandfather would always come up and shovel the must after we're all done into the back of his old Chrysler station wagon. I go, what's he doing with that? Oh, he's going to throw it away. They took it down to the country and cooked it down.
That's so funny. The Southerners, you guys have got some good recipes when it comes to this stuff. That's for sure. I think the Sid that came out of Saudi Arabia was Louisiana, South Carolina, good old Moonshine.
I've read a story where a guy who was working, I don't think it was a Ramco, but he was a chef. So he could go to the market and buy 50 pounds of sugar 3 or 4 times over, and he wasn't suspicious. But finally, he made friends with the Saudi military officer, and the Saudi military officer liked it. So the Saudi military officer was at his compound one day. They were having a bit of a do, and then all of a sudden they get busted by the cops because the Saudi guy turned him in.
Oh, no. What the? That just sucks. That sucks. So back to your childhood for a minute. Do you have siblings?
I have one sister, and unfortunately she passed last year.
I'm sorry to hear that. Were you close? Did you get along, or was it competitive?
The older we got. We weren't horribly close because I lived abroad for so long.
Yeah.
But no, she helped take care of my mom and my mom's waiting years, who also died while I was deployed. My dad too, but I got back for that. But yeah.
Do you have kids, Mike?
Do I know? Okay.
How do you feel about that? How do you feel about that? Who's going to carry the Arrighi family name?
I'm adopted, so I'm not really attached to that. And my wife, she did her swabby thing and sent it back, and I bought one for you too. You want to do it? I said, I have nothing to prove by it, you know?
So you never did it?
No, my sister did because she was working for the Commonwealth of Virginia. She had access to adoption records because she's adopted also. And she says, and she physically got the folder. And then she shared it with my mom, and it really hurt my mom. Made my mom feel a little bit less like a mom. But did you do that? I said, no, I refused to do it. I didn't scream about it, but I had no interest in doing it. You guys saved me from the jaws of growing up in Lorton. You know, so no, didn't interest me. It still doesn't.
Okay. So you never had a curiosity of, where your parents came from or what your...
No, I had no reason to.
Yeah.
They were just really good, kind people, hardworking.
Oh, well, they did a great job with you. I can see you getting a little misty-eyed there, and it's understandable. I feel you. They did a remarkable job, and there is nothing more selfless, I think, than adopting a child and giving them the best that you can. What about your role models? Who was interesting to you growing up?
Oh, Winston Churchill. Bugs Bunny.
Got a little feisty in you there, huh?
A lot of people in history. Maybe it didn't always end up well for them, but there's a lot of people who did major things and contributed. And what you were talking about earlier, trying to make your community or your world a better place. You know, people that were humanitarians. And, I've had this discussion with other people and says, well, he was racist or he was that. I'm sorry. I'm a big Kipling fan. And I understand the era in which he came up, imperial colonial, colony from the UK. So I can't just lump everybody together who are a product of their era and paint them as a deconstructionist, reconstructionist, racist, liberal. I just try to avoid those terms. I've spent a fair amount of time in South Africa. I had a lot of South African friends here, and they're my age or a little younger, so the era they came up in. And I'd listen to them rail about apartheid, good or bad. I would say very little. These are the people that grew up with it. And all the white South Africans weren't pro-apartheid. They weren't all pro, ANC either. So it's different perspective, a different time. And I learned a lot just by listening. And you've traveled in many, many countries yourself. You know where I get some of my best intel upon landing?
Taxi driver? Yeah.
When I was with Capital One, we were doing the first debt equity meeting. And we were bringing all these guys in from Northern Virginia who were sitting on the board at the time. Stanley Westrike, who built Crystal City. Jim Kimsey, who was one of the founders of AOL.
Wow.
And yeah, that's another funny story. But at the end of the day, I'd get up all the drivers and say, tell me about your, handing out envelopes. Tell me about this, tell me about that. And we found out, and it's, I don't know if it's advisable or not, but we found out one of our board members was have certain trouble in a semi-domestic matter. And I knew about it. I didn't tell the CEO. I didn't tell the CFO. But if I needed that knowledge, I was able to collate it and put it in the file.
Where was your first deployment? Where was the first place that you went? Was there somewhere you wanted to go also prior?
To get to the Middle East?
No, anywhere in the world. When was the first time you left Virginia?
Oh, I was Caribbean. One of my cop buddies had bought a timeshare. Mm-hmm. And of course, cops aren't known for their generosity. So he's like, I need 5 more guys and we can 250 apiece or whatever.
Yeah.
And I've been traveling ever since.
Wow. How old were you?
23.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's been interesting.
What are you noticing?
I just wanted to enjoy myself. But then moving on, you start to read a lot of cultural, political clues by what's the mood. You know, what's the currency? Now, when I was up on the Iranian border, still in Afghanistan, you might as well have been in Tehran. Mm-hmm. They were trading in dinar. A lot of the mosques were built by the Iranians, and it was basically indistinguishable from being in Iran proper. What's
the border along there like? And then logistics-wise, I'm curious also, like what's coming across the border?
Everything.
Food? Medicine?
Not so much of that. I know that I had to call out one of our companies because in violation of State Department regulations, they turned up on site, which was a horrible, horrible piece of real estate, with a small Iranian batch plant. So we went up there to inspect the site, and I went, this has got to go. No, Mike, what is wrong? We have just gotten this. I said, yeah, the paint's not even dry on it. It's Iranian. And
what is it, though?
You look at the card, you look at the registration plate on it, and you might find something on the internet very close, but it's just enough for you to go, and other ways to establish that. But it's
so you're always looking at things from an investigatory lens.
Well, investigatory and out of an abundance of caution, and I mean, my head doesn't sit on a swivel 24/7. But I'm always taking it in. Generally, even in this town, I go into a restaurant, I'll sit down, I'll generally be facing the door, and I'll get up, walk to the bathroom, see if there's anybody in there that doesn't look like they're going to do something good. So, yeah, I just try to be situationally aware.
You need that vigilance. You do. The other day, I had to stop at a gas station because I ran out of cat food. And we got so, this post-pandemic thing, we've gotten so lazy with like getting out of the car and whatever. Okay, I'm going to admit I'm the person that's parked up at the Target drive-through, whatever, like bring me my order to the car, because I have the kids in the back. And I'm sitting there just waiting for like 10 minutes. I'm like, I placed this order an hour ago. It should be here by now. And it's just like, peak hours or something. 10 minutes, 20 minutes. And I'm like, that's not going to be ready tonight. And I have to get my kids ready for bed and baths and all this stuff, right? So I'm like, I will just go to the gas station for cat food because I cannot, as you know, you have cats. You can't show up, come back home with no food. So I stop at the gas station and it's like, there's something that happens. I'm always like a vigilant person, but there's something a little extra when you're a mom. You know, it's like, you know, eyes on the kids, holding both their hands. Not only do I have my peripheral vision, I have their peripheral vision. Like I'm checking out every license plate in the thing. All of a sudden, it's like I'm Superwoman. It's dark outside, you know, and I'm like, I'm in mama bear mode right now, you know?
Well, that's not a bad thing. I mean, I've gotten even more hypervigilant at times.
Yeah.
Because now, as you see, I have a walking stick.
Yeah.
And bad guys cue off stuff like that.
Yeah. Especially when you got a nice Breitling on.
Oh, this is my day-to-day one.
I like that you're a Breitling guy. So yes, you were saying about being with a cane now.
Yeah, I mean, it's just very, very aware of what your surroundings are. And people take that for granted. And I mean, I've lectured at the police, government, citizen level. Said, you know, you're walking across the street, you're looking at your phone, and you're not looking around you. I don't care if you're Shaquille O'Neal or an 80-year-old lady. The bad guy's going to notice that.
Mm-hmm. They're waiting for it.
Yeah. Are you familiar with David Grossman, Lieutenant Colonel Dr. David Grossman or Dr. Lieutenant Colonel? He wrote a book, and it's not morbid, but on killing. And he's...
it's called On Killing?
On Killing.
Oh, God.
And it's very academic.
Yeah.
I mean, for people like me. But he's a doctor of psychology, and he's very well regarded. But he talks about there's sheep and there's sheepdogs, and there's wolves. So if you choose, you need to be a sheepdog to look after the sheep to keep the wolves away. That's
the ultimate sacrifice. There's a lot of stupid sheep out there.
Sheeple.
I've been obsessing over these, the Mastiffs out of Turkey. I forget what they're called. These dogs are incredible. I love these guardian dogs. If I had enough land, I would have one of these guardian dogs.
Oh, a Corso, Cane Corso.
I have to pull it up. These dogs are...
Yeah, their heads are this big. Aren't their heads very big?
Yeah, I mean, they can get big. I think they're misunderstood because, everyone kind of bunches them into Anatolian sheepdogs. But, they come in a variety of sizes. You probably said it, and I just forgot. It's called a Kangle Shepherd dog, the Kangle.
Oh,
so
just like
they're
the
kind of
hat.
smaller. They're a little bit smaller than the Mastiffs. Yeah, they're amazing. They have that mentality. They will go up against a wolf. They are the only sheepdog in the Mediterranean that's known to be able to kill a wolf.
Cool.
Excuse me, in guardsmanship. But it also is a wonderful family dog. And, I wish I had the space because I would love that kind of a dog.
Sure.
Yeah. But we're such animal lovers.
I am.
Yeah. If someone's not, I don't know. I'm going to keep them at arm's length a little bit.
I agree.
Yeah. There's something wrong with a person that can't love an animal, So the first place you went, was it Afghanistan?
No. I was going through a divorce at the time.
Oh.
So the timing was really good. And I get a phone call. It's a whole nother story from one of the old McAfee SOG guys, a little bit older than me. And he trained me he's another mentor. I trained with him at 83. Him and his buddies. He's the guy that wrote the book Vagabonds, him and his buddy. Yeah. He calls me up, and I was underemployed because me and him had done some work in Latin America and the Keys and doing a few things here and there. And he calls me up in the morning. One morning he goes, "Hey, Mike." I said, "Yeah, what, Nick?" He said, "Feeney is looking for people in Baghdad. Now, when he says Feeney, he means Donald J. Feeney, ex-Delta operator who invented the re-kidnapping industry. And I knew Don prior to that. Our paths had crossed in a different operation. And he said, send him your CV. So that was on a Friday. I get a call at 5:30 in the morning on Sunday or Monday, and it's Don. And he talks just like Joe Pesci. Hey, Mike, Judy says hi. His wife's named Judy. How soon can you effing be here? And he goes, I said, well, I can get a ticket. I said, I got a platinum card. Yeah, but is it any good? I went, yeah. I said, so he says, book it. Book your flight. So that Friday, I was walking into a Baghdad airport having come in from Amman. So that was...
Yeah, I remember everyone going through Jordan to get to Iraq. Man, every time I'd have to go through that airport, it was just filled with contractors.
Well, it built the new airport.
Yeah.
The Queen Aliyah is quite nice now.
It is. Much better than, there used to be like a Starbucks, like the duty free, a Starbucks, and like 2 other random shops. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But then I was working for another company. We started routing through Dubai. And I'm like, I don't like Dubai. It's too glitzy and glamorous. It's like going to Vegas. It's good for about 3 days. And the transit place, it wasn't bad, but I like the Jordanians a lot better. They were more earthy in a very sincere way. And I developed a little bit of a posse with a bunch of Palestinians.
Cool. So you go to Iraq via Jordan, and then I assume you were like around Baghdad? No.
Shortly after my arrival, we were working on one contract I worked on quite a bit, but then we were building a battalion set down in southern Iraq on a Iraqi base called Numania.
Oh, okay.
So that's why I spent a goodly portion of my time. The project I worked on in Baghdad was Saddam's favorite palace. It was the first palace he had when he became the vice president. And also the first cruise missile landed there, because that was like his little blankie. If he was in Baghdad, there was probably a good chance he was in the neighborhood. But I'm talking to the architect one time, and we had a Kurdish subcontractor that made its own problems, but they did good work. And we can't find the plans. Well, you're not going to go to City Hall and find the plans for Saddam's palace. So the architect goes, I'll be back in 2 hours. Now, Saddam had thrown him in jail for a couple years, because I don't know if he didn't like, some architectural feature. And we're talking, he goes, Mike, come with me. I went, okay. There was a tunnel leading from the palace to the Tigris River, where he had a boat shop operational 24 hours a day in case they had to E&E Baghdad via water. And I'm like, this is James Bond villain stuff.
Yeah. Wow.
Project took us probably the better part of a year. When I got, it was under construction, and all the building inspectors said, just tear it down, because the structural integrity wasn't there. But it was his first palace. So they wanted to. And then the Iraqi government wanted to make it into the new Ministry of Defense. So that's what our goal was, getting it up and ready and fitted out so it could be the Ministry of Defense.
The Kurds were always very interesting, because it was much more peaceful, obviously, in that region, and they had the resources. Did you go up to the KRG at all, or?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Did you? What did you think of the difference? I mean, what do you think it was sort of the secret sauce of, the Kurdish region versus the strife that was going on in Baghdad?
Oh, it's a different world.
Yeah.
They used to have a lovely beer garden right there in Erbil, crossing Kurdish territory, and I was with a team that had local nationals on it. So the Peshmerga, they would confiscate all the Iraqis' weapons, and very polite, very businesslike. Receipt, they'd give me the receipt because they're under my sponsorship, and we'd get them. Never had a problem. We're going back down south. Never had a problem with them.
How is it being in that managerial role, trying to deal with people with very different cultural norms, different work ethic, business ethic? I know from the U.S. standpoint, there's a lot we do not tolerate. We won't even go close to risking some of the business transactional behaviors that we'll see, on a local staff type of situation. So how did you handle those types of scenarios?
Well, it's dependent on the totality of the circumstances long term and what you're looking at across the table. As I said earlier, before we went live, you listen a lot. And sometimes, I don't care if you're from Texas, you can be unreasonable too. And I'm not going to name any initial company where we saw a lot of, I'm not going to say xenophobic, but just if it ain't from the USA, if it isn't written in perfect English, they would go, "What's wrong with these people?" And I was like, "Hey, man," my number one was named Yama. I said, "He speaks English. He speaks Dari. He speaks Pashto. He can read Arabic so he can read the Quran. He speaks 4 languages that I know of. How many do you speak?" There were so many things I didn't learn from expats. I'm with my number one guy, Yama, and we're going through this horrible place called Sorobi. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know if you're aware, the French took a real drubbing there, and a bunch of the Afghan national soldiers turned on them and killed a lot of the French soldiers. Once all the dust had cleared, they found out the Italians had it before, that part of Afghanistan. It's like on the road to Jalalabad. And the Italians were paying off the warlords. The Italians forgot to tell
the French.
So, no flus, you got problems. And that's what precipitated a lot of those problems. The point I was trying to make, we're coming through town and it looks like something out of Mad Max. And I'm not in some big convoy. I'm in a soft-skinned vehicle. I was safer traveling that way. And he goes, "We have to leave now." I said, "Why?" "Taliban's in the neighborhood." I went, "How do you know that?" Because we just come through a little checkpoint. There was cassette tapes pulled out. Because remember, the Taliban were not music fans because it's blasphemous. Oh. I'm sorry. I doubt most of my tier 1
expats or operators are going to
would have noticed that. That's a hell of a lesson.
That is. No, I mean, it's an incredible asset to have that kind of ground cultural intelligence, on the spot in real time and things, but that vigilance, I think if you have a vigilant mindset, it's going to carry with you regardless of where you are. It's cross borders and it's part of who you are. Exactly. Okay. So this is very interesting. Okay. Because many times I've actually been a fan of, go in a soft skin vehicle. You don't want to draw attention. Can you talk to me about your decisions to do that?
It depends on the mission.
Yeah.
Depends what the route history is. Depend on what's going on. You do a projection and you do a retrograde.
Yeah.
I used to get a little bit cross with my Afghani team when they want to wash my car every day. I said, it becomes an IED and a bullet magnet.
You want a dirty car. What are the most difficult things that you faced in Afghanistan as a whole? I mean, they're so tribal. You're dealing across multiple tribes, many geographies. You're up by Iran, you're in Kabul, you're in Kandahar, you're, all over. What's used to concern you the most? How did you deal with the different tribes?
Trying to find the most credible elder. And you also have to realize 70% illiteracy rate in Afghanistan. And of the 30% that can read, last I saw, only 13% were female. So you're dealing with I'm not saying they're stupid, but these people have not had the benefit of most people consider a credible education. And I did another podcast just after Afghanistan fell. And he does a lot of NPR stuff. But so he says, okay, what's your perspective on Taliban? I said, Robin, Taliban 2.0 is Taliban 1.0. It's not going to change. And you see now they're closing down the girls' schools. Mm-hmm. They're making the women routinely wear burqas. So they're not going to change. It's not in their ability to change. Is that their fault? Well, I know we tried for 20 years and made limited inroads, and people tell me, oh, you were there, it all went to hell. And I went, yeah, it did go to hell. But I said, whether you like Biden or not, he stayed there longer than Trump wanted to leave 3 months earlier. That would have been even worse, but I'm not going to get into the Biden-Trump thing. But no, I've been in that airport where everybody's trying to scramble to dozens and dozens of times. I'm sure it was just a bloody madhouse. It was like the fall of Saigon, only in some ways worse.
Why worse? There was no escape for a lot of people.
I know. That's part of it.
Yeah.
You either made it or you didn't.
Yeah.
And fortunately, the company I was working for in Afghanistan, I'd go, get those letters you want signed from our State Department. Just bring them up here. If you say they're good to go, I'll sign it and endorse them. We wanted to get everybody out. And we were pretty lucky, especially our core local national team. Everybody made it to the States or to Australia. We got them and their family out.
You have such a strong duty of care. You don't see that with many people. To a lot of people, it's very transactional. Part of what makes you such a good human is that duty of care as well that you have.
But you can't always show it because you might be trying to do two things at the same time, but all related to duty of care and looking out for people.
What do you mean you can't always show it? Can you explain that?
You have an objective and a mission to fulfill.
Yeah.
And if that means getting RK on that plane at that time to get out of there, I'm not going to have time to have a lot of discussion with you.
True. Yeah. But that's where you're just following through with plans, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you remember, no operational order survives first contact.
What were your key takeaways? Have you ever had like a near-death experience in Afghanistan? That would be a stupid question. I feel like anyone that steps foot there, I've never been there. I'd love to go. I think it's a beautiful country.
It's gorgeous.
It's beautiful. I'd love to go hiking there. But I don't ever, even if it comes down, I can't. I mean, you know why? Here's the thing. Even with change, let's say societally you're able to get the country to advance and increase education and there are women's rights. This is going to take time. This is going to take time.
And it's to a lot of the neighbors' advantage to see them fail. Now, one thing I find very interesting, and you probably have a better take on this than I do, the Chinese have been pumping money in there. And they want to buy all those mineral rights and precious gems rights up there on the Chinese border. And that's a no man's land, I'm telling you.
Have you been there?
As little as possible. So they're like, oh, no, we're jobs for the Afghanis. As soon as the deal's inked and they start mobilizing, the majority of people working for the Chinese are members of the People's Liberation Army. And I see they're not tribesmen. They're not even from the same country. And I saw very famous American construction companies in Iraq. We're not having any problem. We'll hire Egyptians. So the Egyptians are taking the food out of the Iraqis' mouth. Is that what I'm hearing? Oh, it doesn't matter. I'm like going, let's see how long that works. And sometimes it might work for a short time, but it certainly wasn't a permanent fixture of the ability to be able to work. You had to hire the locals. Now, are they the most skilled people in the world? Are they going to show up during Ramadan? Maybe, maybe not. But you have to. You don't play the hand you want. You play the hand you're dealt.
You're dealt. Yeah. Oh, it's so true. And the other thing is, once you create sort of this economic interdependence between the corporation and the local staff, they will protect it because that is their livelihood. Absolutely.
I used to find it funny when I'd go to Kabul Bank, and I can say this now, nothing for me to make a $750,000, withdrawal. And I always used to laugh because the president of the bank would go, "Oh, Mike, we don't mean to hold you up for so long. Next time, call ahead and tell me how much you need to withdraw." What is that old saying? Trust me. Mm-hmm. I'm like, ain't no way.
What are some of the brushes you've had with death?
In Iraq and Afghanistan? Mm-hmm. The night of the earthquake in Afghanistan, that was the closest, that's the most fearful I ever felt. There was a earthquake in Iran, southwest Iran. So we got a bit of it. And it was everything shaking. And I kind of pretty much knew the quality of building integrity and construction there. I'm like, let me just pull the covers over my head. And I hope I don't start hearing things breaking. But the Afghanis are very decorative. So all their chandeliers have those little crinkly glass things. So they're all tinkling, like it's a Rolling Stones concert. And I'm like, ugh. That was pretty unnerving.
It's so unpredictable. But earthquakes in that region are very frightening. Right on a fault line. It's just a matter of time before the big one hits. And they have not engineered for it. You look at what happens in Turkey often, and it's so devastating. It's like seconds. There's nothing you can do,
Well, you were in Doha when we had a couple, and people didn't know what to do.
There were never any clear directives on a local level, but then, corporations always got it right. I got to, hats off to security teams that worked hard on risk assessments and those.
They did that because they had support of their senior management.
Yeah.
And if you don't have support of your senior management mm-hmm. or your influencers, mm-hmm. you could very well be left out.
And there is that American business culture and the sort of, you protect your people. Always, that is one of the first pillars is safety of our people. I do appreciate that a lot of what we did and do is pass on that wisdom and knowledge to, companies locally, try to get them to get their safety standards up and so on.
My boss was in town and he'd come in, but he didn't stay, like we did. And he was a great guy. I'm still in contact with him, love him to bits. So wake up the next morning hearing pop, 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 pop. So he's banging on my door. What's going on? What's going on? I said, I don't know, Stephen. Let me make a few phone calls. I said, if it sounds like it's coming any closer this way, come and get me. So I made a few phone calls, and the Taliban was attacking the Red Cross.
Oh, no.
And actually, they were some pretty brave dudes. You've heard of General Dostum?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
He was my neighbor. It was right near his house. I said, I got it, Stephen. Not a problem. They're dealing with it.
Yeah. We talk about Black Swan events. Can you talk to me about the most impactful and some of the ones that really stood out to you?
Well, the problem with Black Swan events, because there's so many people that go, oh, that'll never happen here. And then it does. And they don't know what to do. And they have never given it much thought. So their world collapses around them trying to figure out what to do. And they become frozen. And I'm diverting from your question a little bit, but I'm going from Baby Assassin's Gate in the green zone to a pumping station across the street that we had the contract to fix. So we get right in the middle of the street and mortars or rockets start impacting about a block down. And I watched two military guys, great guys, Air Force guys, they froze in the middle of the street, like they had become statues. And I grabbed my client, had him, I said, just move. There's the door. Don't stop till you get on the other side of that door. Move now. That's not one of those situations where it's open for a lot of discussion. So there's plenty of black swan events.
I think of it from a risk assessment perspective. You know, it's low probability, high impact. What are those for you right now? Well,
some of it, it's because I know what the matrix, the XY axis. Think of the worst thing that could happen and work backwards. Mm-hmm. And most of the solutions could be very, very benign. And I used to tell my people too, if you don't feel good about going on this mission today, tell me. Nobody here is going to force you to make that move. Mm-hmm. And I meant that. And I had very few people abuse it. Usually it's because they had too much fun the night before.
Yeah. And sometimes, though, it's intuition.
I had one of those one time. I wrote my attorney. I said, look, if anything happens to me on this mission, this is what I'd like for you to do. You don't know.
It's challenging, right? Because it's like, if you're wrong, then it's like, oh, man, you overreact. But I'm like, I'm the kind of person that will never question my intuition, because I think that biologically there is something in our making as human beings, this sort of generational wisdom that we've been able to capture generation over generation that has helped our ancestors survive the most dire conditions. And yeah, it's in our genome. There's something going on that once you get that spider sense of like, hey, listen, you should probably not be in this or something, your body is picking up on signals that are your brain has not been able to fully process. Mm-hmm. And someone is like, very analytical. It's like, sometimes you try to talk yourself out of it. Like, I shouldn't be worried about this.
You were asking about mentors before.
Yeah.
And some you hang out with for a long time and some you just meet in passing. And one of them who used to work up in your way, he says, that's called the paradox of warning. If you think something's going to go bad and you prepare for it or game for it to happen and nothing happens, wait for the bosses to come say, oh, I told you nothing was going to happen. Mm-hmm. So I always enjoyed that term, paradox of warning. I was working a protection detail, and the company was bringing in the Roy Rogers and his son for personal appearances, and I was handling all the movements and everything. Mm-hmm. I do my advance and my op plan. We identified all the class 1 trauma centers. And so I come back with the budget, and they go, Mike, what's this $5,000 for an ALS team to be with you guys 24/7? I went, I'm willing to do whatever you want. I'm going to tell you one thing I'm not prepared to do and will not do. I'm not going to call Dale Evans and said he died on my watch. Approved.
Nice. Gosh, we've only gotten through bits of Iraq, a little bit of Afghanistan. I love this picture of you in the back of a truck with a short AK.
Oh, that was in southern Iraq.
What was that process like, being armed? Did you have private security contractors or did you?
We did. Some were better than others.
Yeah.
I'll be real honest with you. A lot of the last ones I wanted to look after me were the Americans. The Aussies, the British, and the Afrikaners. I mean, they had a different operating model. And the Americans, and I'm not going to differentiate between companies, you do the brief before you got into the hard car. And if this happens, we go here and listen to this guy, and here's a tourniquet. The only thing they were doing was winding the client up. These people don't have military deployment, much less in combat zones or active war zones. And I used to ride with this one British team, and it was great. And we were at a piece of automotive technology that was surplus from the Royal Ulster Constabulary. So it was quite old. I can get in the back of that thing and take a nap versus it's, you know, and I knew a lot of good guys, Westerners, who worked for those companies, and they were just trying to make a living. And I don't fault them personally, but the business model I found a bit troubling. We had one operator who purposely wrecked. We were going to the embassy annex down there in Hilla, and they were our team, and they had a brand new B6 vehicle and wrecked it, doing stupid stuff, and they lied about it. And you know my background. I'm sitting there in the debriefing room, and I said I was in the lead car. I have no idea, which I didn't. And I'm looking at these guys making their statements and writing stuff down. And I tell one of my crew, it stinks like yesterday's diapers. This ain't what happened. So I go on R&R and found out it was all staged. And that same knucklehead who wrecked the vehicle is on the way to the airport and allegedly opens up. He says, I want to some Iraqis today. And pops the door and starts taking pot shots at cars behind him. And allegedly, according to witnesses, he struck one of them. And I don't know what the autopsy said or anything, but it was purposeful in the witness's opinion. That's worse than reprehensible. He knew better.
If that's true, it's tragically sad, and kind of, you know, back to your earliest career, you know, with violent homicide, there are just some people that are just born a little different. And you know what's sad is some of these people actually seek these types of careers to be able to just fulfill that. But I remember the story of someone that was abusing the elderly in a nursing home. And it's like, yeah, of course they're going to be a nurse in a nursing home because they have access to, you know, easy targets, or someone that's a child molester, you know, that it ends up being a teacher, you know.
Or a Catholic priest or scoutmaster, or
whatever
anything,
it is.
doctor.
As a mom, I'm watching like a hawk, you know, because those guys, those predatory people find a way to get into the system. Oh,
absolutely. The one thing I can truthfully say, I saw very little police abuse when I was on the PD here locally. And when we did see it, we didn't hesitate. That was our culture.
Yeah. You build a strong culture around that. That's good. So the person that took the photo, sadly, has passed.
Yeah, he was killed several weeks later. South African. He was a member of 3-2 Battalion, which during the border wars, they were like Delta Force, you know, for the time in the region. And he left us and went to work for the fabricator of those vehicles. They were called Rivas. South Africans had got this whole nomenclature around stuff they had to build when people were boycotting them because of apartheid. And he was making a delivery of one of those vehicles, and he was this won't mean much to your listening public, but he was at this place called Root Brewers and Root Senators. They're all named after basketball teams. The Americans named them, not the Iraqis. And he, gets to a choke point, and for your listening audience doesn't know what a choke point is. I've got to slow down. I've got to turn. I've got to wait for the stop sign or the light. So you're on the X. So this molten copper electrically formed projectile built by the Iranians, and he had to sit up in the vehicle. So it cut him in two. He was killed instantly.
Sorry to hear that. And you later wrote his eulogy.
I was asked to write his eulogy by his employer in Iraq. I couldn't read it. But they actually read it at his funeral in South Africa as well. So it's part of getting invited to that area and the turmoil and the conflict. So, yeah. I don't try not to make a habit of writing eulogies. But
it must be very difficult to write one. I've never written one. What's that process like? Do you see yourself when you're writing it? I can't help but think that one would reflect on that when writing the eulogy of their friend whom they worked with.
Well, writing a usually also gives you the opportunity to talk to people that served with him, who knew him, who knew his hard side and his soft side. And then you take your own experience, as you mentioned, and you kind of filter it through all that. And being a bit of a hack, I slipped in a few poetic lines in the beginning and the end. So.
What's the type of emotion that one feels with that?
In the immediate, nothing. How do I get past this issue? And then the longer you step back from it, and you don't volunteer for this, it just kind of comes up and says, oh, I'm still here. Don't forget about this. And but he was one of many. I'd be in a meeting with people. We get a call 20 minutes later, oh, such and such going back to Baghdad just got RPG'd and killed this person, that person, and that person. And if you let it get to you too much, you're going to lose focus of your mission. So mission first. Mission first, duty of care. Once it's all done and dusted, then you could sit down and, with perhaps appropriately colored drink in your glass and toast and make some reflections.
Mm-hmm. Is a eulogy a good closure? Is it a good mechanism of getting past PTSD, or does it awaken the trauma?
It's all part of the same cake batter. You know, there's nothing that's ever going to give you 100% closure.
The military tries to deal with PTSD. What do you think of the private sector's response, or American enterprise in general? What do you think of their preparedness for dealing with people's PTSD? It
depends on the organization you work for. What's its corporate culture? What they want to know, and are they doing it and asking you about that for the right reasons? Not to protect them from future lawsuits, but also to really help you try and heal as an individual.
I don't know that there have been any lawsuits, PTSD-related lawsuits against the private sector. Do you?
I can't call any off my head, but I would be woefully surprised if there hasn't been. Mm-hmm.
But everything's probably settled out of court, so there's not really much of a...
Oh, and that's another reason State Department like using contractors. You know, that didn't go in the official body count.
Oh, I know. Yeah. You mentioned liking working with the Afrikaans and, the British military. You go to Libya with a team. One of them is an SAS guy, Jim Foster.
Yeah, he's the one that got me to the country.
Okay, so talk to me about that. Talk to me about your first day in Libya.
I found it amazing. And as, you know, I might have said it earlier, but if you believe in a higher power, they have a sense of humor. because I had been tracking Gaddafi in that country since the Reagan years. I mean, not just casually, but analytically. When there was very few things written about, Libya and Gaddafi, and he was busy funding all the East European terrorist movements and working with the Soviets. Oh, and then I work with the guy, I come back from Libya. I don't even think he's still alive. And he, the name Billy Waugh? Mm-hmm. He worked for Billy Waugh and Dewey Claridge when he spent his time with the agency. Mm-hmm. And he says, he's older than me, anything going on in Libya? Nah, but they were kind of looking for the guy from the Lockerbie bombing. He was dying of prostate cancer. He says, I worked that case. And he says, I asked him, did he do it? And he wore his glasses right about here. Yeah, like Oswald did. I never asked him another question.
Good listening skills, Mike. So talk to me about, your perceptions. You land in Tripoli, presumably through Turkey.
Yeah, there's 3 of us going in. We had a lot of Turkish subcontractors who did good work, very good work. They were some of the best construction workers I saw in that part of the world. So we were going to partner with them if anything happened in Libya, and they're the ones that got us in there. And we landed, and I'm with a good old corn-fed American boy from Denver, Colorado, and a business development guy who's a Persian American. And he was like a long-tailed tomcat in a room full of rocking chairs the whole time we were there. Can we get out of it? I've been in so many different not so nice places that I'm just going, identify Jim and his sidekick. He goes, he's got the papers and he's got to wait because they only get a couple flights in a day because we flew into the old Wheelus Air Force Base because it wasn't safe to fly into the main airport. And this other guy's like apoplectic. And I went, don't worry about it. I got it taken care of. Eventually we get out. And then a couple days later, when they kill Gaddafi, they shut down Martyr Square and have a big hufla party. Yeah. It was hilarious. They got bouncy houses. They got cotton candy. And that coin I showed you, that's why I picked that up in the alley. Everybody, And it was, but he wouldn't come out of his room. Oh, I've got some business stuff to do. In my opinion, he was very uncomfortable in that. And I'm like, this is great.
Well, I mean, freedom from, decades of repression, it's unpredictable,
I felt, in Tripoli, only once or twice did I feel threatened at all. Because once again, I listened to what the people were telling me. You'd have the Libyans, some who had lived there and then went back and were beaten and abused when they went back. And I was glad that I was there where I could listen to them. Because it's all sad, but sometimes people just want to be able to tell their story.
Did you go outside of Tripoli?
Oh, yeah, a little bit. Well, actually, the Friday, because it's the day off, they had dispatched Gaddafi on Thursday, the 19th of October. No, the 20th. So on the 21st, we hop in the car, soft-skin vehicle, and if you go right outside of Tripoli, you're going to Leptis Major. If you go left, you go down to Zabratha. Mm-hmm. So we spent the day touring the Roman ruins, totally unmolested. No, mafi mushkila, no problem. It was amusing in some ways and quite interesting.
Libya has some remarkable history. What are your impressions of its potential?
I think who's running the country? Hiftar and his people in the east or the recognized government in the west? That's something they're probably going to have to figure out on their own. But, you have to see who's trying to, and, it's all politics.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it always is, yeah.
Who's trying to act in their both self-interest, not only in the immediate, but what are they laying a foundation for moving forward?
Did you feel much of the proxy interests playing out when you were there?
That wasn't my primary reason for being there. That's an interesting question. I had been at enough interesting places to know, okay, who are the people behind the curtain? Countries are always going to act in their own self-interest.
Mm-hmm. And they need to determine what peaceful government will come in next.
And what does that mean to this group? Is it the same as this group?
That neck of the woods, I always worry about the civil war.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you don't have to look too far. Look to Sudan, what's happening there. And then all the scum that comes along with civil war, acts of genocide, pillaging, rape, all this just horrible, the worst part of humanity.
Oh, absolutely.
So that kind of brings me to a question. You've seen so much conflict. You've seen the worst of humanity. Do you think we're intrinsically good? Do you think, now we see sort of here we are building out AI. What are we building? Is it good? Is it good?
All technology is to it. Are you in Huxley's Brave New World?
Right. I don't know the answer to this, but are we teaching the best of humanity or not? And so I guess I just wonder, do humans need war?
Well, that's a real philosophical question. I think they might have too much time on their hands if they didn't have it. Oh, maybe to do good stuff. That would be nice. It's hard to try to divine what's in some of these country leaders. What are they thinking of? And what bothers me about this country right now, and we had this discussion earlier, if Ukraine falls, then just wait for the rest of the world. And people say, oh, we don't have any business over there. We have every reason to be there. Just look beyond the next 5 minutes.
Do you think that's because of your Cold Warrior mentality, your Cold War stance, your understanding of the importance of, a sovereign Ukraine? Most people say we need to focus inward and stop in Ukraine and let what happens.
And let the world suffer under the next czar?
There are so many internal problems. There's so much from an economic standpoint that Americans need aid with, our own people. And so why do we need to police the world? I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm curious your position.
I wish we didn't have to. I wish people could just figure it out for their own selves. But America's got the big sticks. And we make plenty of mistakes. But if it's like you go to Fort Bragg and you see the statue of what they call Iron Mike, and it's like on the placard, if not me, who? If not now, when?
Yeah. And this is very important to you. I can hear it in your voice. That's that patriotism coming out?
No, just love for humanity in general.
Yeah.
If you talk to somebody about Ukraine and the famine between the wars, very few people understand that Stalin starved 1 million plus people. And I have a dear friend who's Ukrainian. He's born in this country, but his family's all from Ukraine. So the Russians were going to come in and steal all his grain. And so he just went out and burnt his fields. And then the Soviets came back and they killed him. And my buddy's father hunted the Russian officer down. It took him about 6 months to a year. Found him, and then dealt with the guy that killed his dad rather efficiently. And those people still remember that stuff in that part of the world.
I feel so horribly for the youth right now. I'm not the one that says this. I've heard this before, but it's young men fighting old men's wars.
Oh, I think that's a very valid statement.
Yeah, and it's horrible. It's pretty much trench warfare right now. Mm-hmm. And people just don't have the ability to wrap their mind around that.
Well, I doubt if we'll ever see in my lifetime us emptying our jails to recruit people to go fight our BS war. Now, there's not a lot of discussion about that, but we know the Russians are doing that and have done that. That's the sign of me to a very slippery slope.
If not now, when? You talk about listening to people. You're an excellent source, a reliable source of information. A lot of that is ground intelligence that you're getting from your own expedition out into some of the most dangerous places. How do you judge difficult personalities? How do you deal with them? How do you ascertain what is credible and not?
You watch them very carefully. And not only what they say, it's how they say it. That's the easy answer. What do the totality of the circumstances tell you? And are you willing to change your opinion if new facts come to light? I think that's very integral to the process.
There's so much misinformation out there. Disinformation, actually.
Disinformatia.
Yes, exactly. You know, we've had some interesting conversations. You've said all of this comes at a cost.
Oh. Yeah, what that was in relationship to, I've told more than one person this, but I said, yeah, I led a comic book life. Now I'm paying for it, but it comes with a cost. And it's not woe is me. It's like, the older you get too, the more introspective and reflective you get. So you start thinking about not what coulda, shoulda, but, and not just emotionally, but physically as well. I mean, yeah, from my shoulders down to the bottom of my feet, I ache every day. And it manifests itself in a number of ways. But I don't know that I changed a lot. Even the bad stuff, you learn from it. Hopefully valuable lessons. But yeah, that's my short answer on that one.
What are some of those valuable lessons?
Some of the valuable lessons are there are people out there that care about you. That hopefully you're working for an employer that supports you. That believe in what you do. I remember a door slamming match with our construction manager. Call Central Casting and send me the NASCAR junkie from North Carolina. We got on fine. But he told me one time, he said, Mike, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard of, some operational issue. I said, Jeff, I don't tell you how to pour concrete. Don't tell me how to do my job. Mm. Do you understand? Well, I didn't have to get that way. I went, do you understand? You're welcome to chime in about it. I'm happy to explain any phase of the operation to you and remove all logical concerns you may have.
Sounds like boundaries are important.
Well, I'm not there to, I'm not going to tell you what kind of load-bearing steel you need here. I want to make sure you have a safe environment to do it, and you tell me your boundaries, I'm happy to share mine with you.
You talk about introspection. I have heard you talk about your story. I'm going to ask you a question, and forgive me, you don't have to answer. It's just my mind is going there. You're such an explorer. You take risk. Listening to you talk, you have carved your own way, taken your own path. You've always had a sense of mission and purpose. Do you think, given your non-knowledge of your origin, that you are on a path of discovering who you are or creating that person?
No, you forge your own way. It's funny, alluding to what you just said, over the past several years, you turn around and, you look in the rearview mirror. I'm like, did I ever have a choice where my career take me, or was I just brought there through a higher power? Did I even have a choice? And why did I seek out these roles? And why a lot of people say, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going there. I'm going, what time do we leave? No.
So you think that sense of mission is divinely infused in you?
I'm not going to say it's divine. I'm going to say it's helped guide me. I told you, I recommended my company not going to Libya. But I said, if you're bound and determined, I'm reading the mission.
Mm. And you were there.
Oh, yeah. And it was a lot of fun in retrospect.
Yeah.
History was being made. History. Stuff I had been following since the early 80s. And I'm like, this is pretty cool.
What did you think of Gaddafi's denuclearization?
Well, part of it was he saw eventually what happened to Saddam.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't want to be Saddam number two.
He's like, I still want to be a dictator in power for at least
I want
another
to be
decade.
dictator light. He was definitely not good for the region or the country. And people say, oh, he had 100% literacy rate. Yeah. So?
Doesn't make you smart.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, like I said, you've always been a leader. What makes a good leader?
The willingness to listen and the willingness to make a decision and to live with the decision and to apologize if you need to apologize. Be vulnerable in some ways. Now, there's a time and place for everything, but it can't be some namby-pamby trying to call in fire. And, you have to use your command voice sometimes. You can't ask, oh, do you mind if? No. Do it now. Don't ask me. Just do it.
Yep.
And this is my greatest legacy. I'll take luck over skill any day. Everybody I was charged with protection went home to their friends and family, regardless of where home was in the world.
Remarkable.
Lucky.
Well, luck and skill and good foresight. Mike, again, my hat's off to you. You're such a remarkable person. I'm glad we crossed paths. And I appreciate you so much for being on the Not A Grayman podcast.
It's been my pleasure. It's so good to see you again.
All right, let's see here. So I'm just going to grab this since it's rolling. All right, so here we are, Mr. Arrighi. And let's take a look. Oh, I didn't even cover about the samurai sword.
No problem.
Well, we got to. We have to include this. So you co-produced the film.
Yeah.
And I know you mentioned that you love martial arts.
Yeah, this was the biopic of Pat Morita, who played Mr. Miyagi. And I wasn't involved in it. But prior to that, they did a biopic on Mr. Miyagi's stunt double. Oh, guy is a legend in martial arts world. A guy named Fumio Demura. He's actually one that taught Bruce Lee how to use nunchucks. And so he was a stunt double. They offered him the role, but he said, my English was so bad. So we had dinner a couple nights at the W. You know where that is.
Yeah.
Nights in a row. And we had a grand time. And he wasn't in good health. and he died less than a year ago. But just before COVID, 2 weeks later, we could never have done it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So we get back, and a few days later, my buddy, who I did the movie with, says, "Hey, Fumio wants your address." What's he want my address for? He's sending around a bunch of ninjas to kill my family. But wanted to send me a gift.
Wow.
Because he's old school karate, and I came up in the same era, but much younger.
Oh my!
So,
look at that, a real samurai sword. I've never actually held a real samurai sword. I'm fascinated by the craftsmanship. I kind of read up about it before, but wow.
But this is not a stamped blade. This is a hand-hammered, hand-forged blade.
Wow.
So you would cut.
This is made by a swordsmith.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I don't want to touch the blade.
I would prefer you did.
Yeah, I know.
Because it leaves sweat.
Oh, okay.
And it makes it rust.
Okay. It's beautiful. Look at that. Wow. Hold on. Let me get a good shot on that.
Yeah, this is the length for a foot samurai. If you were on horseback, it'd be about 3 or 4 inches longer because of the stroke you have to take while you're on horseback.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is something else. What a magnificent honor to receive.
Oh, I was, as they say in the UK arcade, I was gobsmacked. I went, "What's this, send me a sword?" And the guy introduced me to him, says, "He doesn't send me a sword."
Well, you know what? You leave an impression on people. I gotta say, that's a beauty. Congratulations. The other thing here is picked up right after Gaddafi's killing.
I bought that the night of the party.
Check that out.
The Thursday when he got killed.
10-year anniversary coin out of Libya. This is made out of silver, right?
Yeah, it's 925. It's just under an ounce.
And so here on the back, I would not be able to read this.
It's commemorating his 10-year anniversary as dictator, as one does.
Yeah. Yeah, I see on here it says 1969 and then 1979. So he was in power for 10 years right here. A young Gaddafi.
Under General Gaddafi?
I don't know. Who knows about that?
Thank you.
Beautiful. Thanks for sharing those.
Oh, yeah.